Well, today I'm joined by Lisa Molite. Lisa, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So this is unique because Lisa and I serve on staff together, so it's not like most of the interviews that we do, but go ahead and tell everyone about you and your family and your role at our church.
Okay, well, I am a wife and a mom of two girls. They are both adults now. They're both in college. One's graduating, we hope, the end of this year, and the other one is a junior, so she's got 2 more years. And then I am the elementary director at Community Christian Church in White Marsh, Maryland.
That's right. You got a terrible boss, but you get by. It works. It's fine. But I wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about creating environments, because you create amazing environments at our church every week for elementary age kids, in addition to like events that we do, things like that. And maybe 5 months ago now, I can't remember, we did a webinar where you shared a lot of what you do and how you do it, which is great. And so people will link to that in the show notes and they can go look through that, which is kind of more detailed, I guess, than what we're going to talk about here today. We're going to talk more about a little bit of how you do it and some of the reasons why. But before we do that, let's just start with the kind of the overarching question. You love creating captivating environments for kids. You think it's really, really important. Why is that? And what difference do you think it makes?
Well, I guess for me, I would say that I like to look at other establishments sometimes and why we love them. And, some of the most beloved things we have in our culture right now, if you think about Starbucks or Apple or Disney, those places are places people love to go. They love to go in. They love to sit there. People play on iPads in the Apple store, even when they're not, buying anything. And I think it's because of the experience that they have when they walk into these places. And so to me, I think environment matters, and it matters in the way that you greet people and the way that you get to have people come in and invite them into your space. So to me, if those establishments are doing it in that way, I think the church should be doing that even better than they are. And we should kind of be taking our cues from them, because especially with children's environments, I look at it as though I don't know what, everyone's church experience has been, but I grew up in a very traditional background, and my church experience, while it was great on many levels, it was very kind of a little bit more stiff. And so I think when kids can come into an environment and feel like it's boring or not engaging, they can begin to think that's what God is like. And I'm just not okay with that. So I want to create an environment where kids want to run to church, where they're excited to be there. And then we get this great platform to be able to teach them about their Savior. And that just is, I think the environment sets the tone for that. So I think we have to be really intentional.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's easy to think of like Disney or Starbucks or these places you're mentioning and not see the environment part, because they do create great products, great food or coffee, great experiences, right? Like at Disney. And you might think, well, no, most of the reason it's great is because of those things, not like what it looks like or what it feels like. But the reality is we do, all of us, it's all together. It's all one package, because you could separate some of these companies from other companies just by how it looks and how it's presented. You know what I mean? And the experience, the other company might create just as good of a product, maybe not with Disney, but like with some other ones, right?
Right. I think that's true. And I think, obviously today, especially, we'll probably talk more on the decor end of things. And I think decor speaks to environment. If you think about when you have people to your home, or if you've ever been to someone's home and it just felt comfortable, it smells good and it's comfortable and you just feel warm and you're welcomed, and all of that is part of the experience. But what it looks like, if it's not clean, or if, that person's home is just disorganized and a mess, you may not feel as invited or as though there's a place for you there. So to me, decor kind of sets the stage, I guess, and the experiences come along with that. So I think it's both end, but yes, for sure, I have a bend towards the decor aspect of it, for sure.
So as we talk about that today, we're not going to talk as much about just your general church environment. What's the space look like? How, I don't know, walls and color and accents and pieces and things like that. Though that's really, really important. We're going to talk most about decor, as you call it, like what changes in our case. So how can you set the stage a little bit for what that means in our church? Like, what does it mean when you create a set or you create an environment, and how does it change and how does it work and all that?
Mm-hmm. So for us, the way it works in our church, we use a curriculum that changes its theme, and they call them life apps every month. So that with that, we change our decor, particularly for our stage. Now, I would say across the board, the color on your walls, the color of your carpets, especially for children's, that's very important to be bright and engaging and fun. But I would say most of that in our environment is static, meaning it doesn't change. It's pretty much the same all of the time. But our stage is where we really do our best to make a change, make some wow factors, and we have a whole set design that we change every single month based on the new theme that comes up.
And we use 252 Kids from Orange. They have that life app where they're teaching that from the Bible, a part of God's character every month. But then they also has the theme, which relates to the life app, but it's different. I mean, that's where the decor part comes from, right? Because you get kind of a theme from that. And so and maybe it could even be helpful to think of specific instances, but every month you're creating a new set, kind of a new environment. What are some of the key tools, supplies, tactics, that are used every month to create this set?
I would say most of what we do is focus on our focal wall or our backdrop. And so we have a stage where our teaching happens, and that's really important to us, that teaching happens in one place and all of the kids come to that place. And I think that's why it lends itself well to be the place that changes every month and goes along with the theme that we're currently working on. So for us, it starts with the backdrop and our production screens, our big screens where we project images and graphics and things like that. And the way that ours is designed currently, our screens are above our backdrop. So it's almost as though it extends to create one big, large backdrop. So we try very hard to look at the graphics from the theme each month and from the life app and what we're teaching, and sort of pull from that as we head down towards the backdrop and onto the stage then. So it's almost these layers. So you've got these graphics on the top, on the projection screens, and then the backdrop, and then the stage itself. And we can do anything from, a very simple backdrop to building out. And it really depends on the month. We share space. So we have to take ours down and up every week for our student ministry to be able to get in there and use the same space. So when we're in that season, we probably are focusing more on just the backdrop and a few things that come off the backdrop onto the stage. But in the summer, for example, when student ministry doesn't meet as often, we build out and our stage becomes a little bit more elaborate. Even some of the room becomes a little bit more engaged with the theme and all that we're teaching.
Yep. Somebody's who uses 252 Kids and they know what the summer theme was, they're probably going to die when they hear this. But you had those awesome Gadget and Gizmo robots that a guy in our church built that looked like they were made of metal, and they looked like real metal robots, stood like 6 feet tall, greeted kids when they came, which is a lot of fun. And so that was out in the environment, all summer, because like you said, it didn't have to change for student ministry because our student ministry doesn't meet in the summer. But now that's gone, and now we're back to student ministry meeting, and so your set is more just like on the stage there. And we'll put pictures in the show notes too, so people can see. But more than that, what we'll do is we'll link to your blog, readysetsunday.com. Anybody that does 252 Kids, I encourage you to follow along there because you share our ideas like in the process. So if people want to think about it before it's happening, you do that. And then you also show usually the final product. Here's what we built and how we built it. And I think it's just fun watching people collaborate on this stuff, at least everybody that uses that same curriculum. But even if you don't use Orange curriculum, what we're talking about here applies across the board. So as you create like the backdrop and some different pieces, what do you use? How does it work? How much does it cost? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, we've done a lot of different things, but where we've landed now is we love insulation foam. It's probably our favorite tool that we have, and we use it for a lot of things. The backdrop itself is created out of 5 pieces of 8x4-foot insulation foam. It's just those big sheets that you buy at hardware stores, Lowe's, Home Depot kind of thing. And we slide them into a track that sits behind our stage, and there's a track at the top and the bottom. And so they slide across, and these 5 panels are right next to one another, and they just create this backdrop. We paint them, and we continue to paint them. It depends on the thickness you get as far as cost. You were asking about that. if you get the 3/4 inch, it's about $15 and change per panel. If you get the 1 inch, it's about $18 and change per panel. And we just paint them and we keep them and we keep painting over them until they look a little bit like, okay, we need to reinvest, in some new ones. So that's been a really great option for us. And a big reason for that is because we can build out on top of that by using other foam, insulation foam or whatever we're using, and we pin it into the insulation foam with these things called T-pins. They're kind of like quilting pins, I think. We get them at Michael's or Joann's Fabrics or AC Moore. I don't know, whatever your craft store is. But we use that because it's so easy. We don't have to nail in. And then when you remove that pin, you don't see the pinhole. So that backdrop stays pretty nice and you don't notice. If we had wood panels up there and we were nailing in and out, you're constantly puttying holes and things like that, having to touch up. So this just works really well for us. And the foam, you can cut it a lot of different ways. You can cut it with a T-square and a straight edge, and we do that for all of our straight lines. But you can also use a hot knife. That's our second favorite thing that we work with to carve it and shape it, and you can get curves and things like that. So we will, for example, paint a backdrop a solid color, and then we'll build some pieces, maybe trees or whatever it is that we've got going for that month, out of insulation foam pieces as well, and then we'll pin that on, and we can layer it out and just, we've had gift boxes at Christmas and things like that. So it just, we can continue to build the stage coming out to more of a 3D effect.
So some people listening are wondering, you're talking about painting panels. I mean, that is the largest part of your environment usually is the panels that are painted and what's on top of them. Some people might be thinking like, well, how much skill does that require? Do you have like lots of great artists? And we do have a couple really good artists in our church, but most of your sets don't use that. In fact, high percentage of your sets don't use what I would call like artistry skill, right? You know what I mean? Absolutely. So how do you do it?
So I am not an artist at all. I think I like to pretend I'm creative and, I have this artistic side, but quite honestly, I cannot draw anything. So I have had moments where I've enlisted an artist, that I know we have in our church as part of our congregation, and I'll ask them to do something, and that's more of a specialty thing where it might be more of like a mural or it requires some shading. But for the most part, our panels are painted a solid color, and anything we want to put on top of them, whether it be that we build it out or we paint it directly onto those flat panels, those 5 panels, I use a projector, an old projector that, was part of our projection screen thing at one point. And I project right onto the foam core, the image that I want. I trace it and then we carve it or we cut it. So it's not artistic at all that way. There's not much to it. Most of it is done with solid paint. We don't do a whole lot of shading or anything like that. So, and this month in particular, our theme is the lunchroom. So we didn't really carve anything. We created placemats with actual plates and cups and forks and knives, and we made them into a circle, and we used lunch trays, and we just, in that case, we couldn't pin anything because they were plastic, so we used Velcro, and that's another option sometimes. The problem with that is when you pull the Velcro, the paint gets pulled, so you will be touching up there. But for this month, that's the way we went. So so we don't really use a whole lot of artistic things unless it's specific and there's something special we're doing.
Yeah, which is good for most people, because I think most people listening are thinking, I don't have someone, that could paint something, that really takes skill and has shading like you're talking about and all that. It's mostly the foam core, solid paint, colors within lines, little paint by numbers action with a projector. You like to add depth. I know that's a big thing for you. Is the back is probably the biggest part, those 5 panels and what they look like, but you like to create depth on the stage too. And you mentioned a couple of those things, gift boxes at Christmas, trees. I think of the one time where you created 3 or 4 trees out of foam core that like free stood on the stage. I don't remember if you hung them from the ceiling or if you created a thing to help them stand up, but what are some other things like that?
In that particular instance, we can't really hang much from the ceiling on this stage. We have done that in the past, but because our screens, as I mentioned before, are above the stage, the wires would show. So even if we use fishing line, it creates a shadow on the screen. So anything we stand on the stage, we have to make, and it's really makeshift. We just take another piece of insulation foam, our favorite thing, we cut it into a triangle, and we stand it up like a picture frame. So that's how we would build out from the backdrop to the front of the stage, or sometimes even off the stage onto the side. We have done a couple of things. This summer, we did a whole lab for Gadget and Gizmo, the engineers, or the Imagineers, Gadgeteers, that's what it was. Sorry. That had shelving and toys and all sorts of actual gadgets and inventions. But then we also put just these 1x1 square poles, I guess. We attached them to the bottom of our stage, and we hung string lights across. And we were mimicking a lot of the graphics. We do that a lot. We will take the graphic and mimic it onto the stage. And then what we project up top matches, but it's not this exact same. We'll just take pieces of it. So we did that for this Gadget and Gizmo lab. And we've done, I think I mentioned the Christmas boxes. We did the trees for like a spooky feel one year. I think that was last year for Halloween. We had a circus tent one time because the theme had to do with the circus. So that we built out with plastic tablecloths and string. And again, we used these poles that we kind of brought out, and everything could be taken apart and flattened against the backdrop so that we could be portable. So trying to think of a few other things we've done, but I'm drawing a blank right now. You could probably help me more with some of the sets we've done.
Well, this makes me think of another question I was thinking of too, about what are some of the favorite sets you've created or pieces that were really good. And I know I always talk about that because I helped with it, so I remember it more. But the Chillinator, it was like, I don't remember the theme.
Yeah, it was Be Cool. It was about patience.
And so you had like snowy mountains, didn't you?
Chill out. And actually, we didn't do the snowy mountains for that one. That was a different one. That was base camp.
Okay.
But we did do a lot of snow. We had snowflakes and stuff all around the stage, but we had this particular Chillinator that we built out of foam core, if I remember correctly, and painted it silver. And we had those dryer vents coming off, so it looked like this machine, and the person actually got in it. And you would be able to speak about how, because you helped me with all the tech part of that with the.
Yeah, we had one of your volunteers and I had. We had like plexiglass windows. So like when the person got in, it's like sci-fi movies and like a cryogenic chamber where they freeze people or whatever was what it was supposed to look like. So I remember, didn't we frost like some kind of spray allowed us to make it look like we frosted the window too? Mm-hmm. And then that one of the guys on your team had the great idea of using like a wet vac.
Oh,
and
right.
Just reversing the airflow. And so it blew air around in there. And I think there were two. And we had it on a switch. So like live during your thing, somebody get in there and turn it on, and it makes a lot of noise. So it sounded like it was a real thing. And I think it had like a LCD screen on the bottom that said something or something like that, which was really cool. And kids just love that stuff. I think those are the ones too that really stand out, or when it's part of the teaching, or there's some sort of interaction with it, even if it's small. Like this month, your hosts are doing stuff where they're supposed to be at the lunch table at school, and so there's some relationship there. But like that, I know that one definitely stands out. The summer ones are usually bigger. You mentioned that they go longer, and we can do more of the room. So I think of a lot of our ones that we did over the summer. The one that was full of lights, and one of them hit my wife in the head that we laugh about. Pretty much every year. And because we had to take the whole thing down for a wedding. So some of those, I just think they're just great environments that we love creating. You really love creating, do a great job with. But the thing that I've talked about with you before that's pretty interesting is, the curriculum goes by month. Mm-hmm. So each month's a new set, and we're going to talk through in a minute what that looks like for you, how that works, the schedule, all that. But when we look back at our attendance history, we almost always have a bigger attendance in elementary the first Sunday of the month. And some of it is we push for that. No different than in the main service. You might promote, it's a new series, invite a friend, that kind of thing. We do that too. So I think that's part of it. But part of it is there's a culture now of like, there's a new set. Like, Mom, I want to be at church. There's a new set this month. It's the first Sunday. Which is really
cool. I actually had a story. One of my large group coaches has a daughter in our environment, and they were driving, and he was coaching that Sunday. He knew it was the first Sunday, but he didn't really make any connections. And he'd been reading the script all week, but again, didn't think about it. And his daughter said, I can't wait to see what the set looks like. And he was like, asking her what? And she said, it's a new set. It's a new month. It's the first Sunday of the month. And he said, it didn't even connect for me, but she's been waiting for it. So that was a huge win for our team. We were excited to know that kids do notice that. And get excited about it, and
Yeah.
hopefully want to bring their friends and all of that. So
Yep. And every environment's different. A lot of the people listening might have an environment where they don't have a stage. And so they're using some kind of focal wall, and you can do that. Or no matter what you have, you might have kids enter into like a small group room, and then they come to a large group room later. We would love that, but we don't have that much space, right? No. So, it just so happens in our space, kids come in and they see the stage. It's like, the first thing. So that's cool too, because it creates like a little bit of a wow moment, when it's new, and you open those doors and they come in and everything's going. It's just a really cool experience. But I know another question people will have is, well, how do you do this if you don't have the budget for it? Right? What if you have no budget? What if you have $25 a month? What would you recommend?
Well, I definitely recommend, if you have even a small amount of money, to start with a focal wall. I really believe just a teaching principle is to have a space to teach what your content is. So whether you use a monthly, theme, or you have a curriculum that changes monthly or not, to have kids move to a place. I mean, I remember as a first and second grade teacher, they would all come up to the blackboard and sit on the carpet, and I'd have my rocking chair there. So just the space where we're all gathered, and kids do better when they're gathered in front of you rather than sitting at desks or sitting in rows or that kind of thing. I mean, I know a lot of churches use benches and things like that, and I'm not against that. I just know if they can gather in one spot, and you can have a wall behind you that points to what you're teaching, and you can use that wall and interact with it. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. I mean, it could be pipe and drape that you pin things on. It can be a wood frame that has this insulation foam on it, and you paint it and change it, each month. And there's a lot of different ways to get around making a focal wall and making it look good and exciting. And it also adds to that wow factor, because kids know, oh, it's time to move to this space, and something's going to happen here, and I'm going to be engaged in something fun. And so that would be my first thing to purchase. If I were doing anything, I'd have a space to teach and a backdrop behind me that would help me teach. The next thing I probably would say would be, when you get some money, projection screens and using TVs or and projectors and that sort of thing just always adds to the experience, especially in this media-driven world, and kids are on screens all the time. So if you can utilize that and have the money toward that, that would be awesome too. So those would be big things.
And I would say, from a tech standpoint, TVs are better unless your environment's pretty large. Like if you have an environment that's holding upwards of 100 kids, you probably want projector screens, or maybe not. It really depends on the environment. But if the room is small enough, or if there's not as many kids, TVs are way better than projectors, just because you can get pretty large TVs for cheap now. Bulbs don't burn out. You know what I mean? There's not a separate device hitting it. Like there's just so many complications that come up with. We use projectors, and it's great. But I wish, I wish there were TVs that size that weren't ridiculously expensive.
Right.
Because usually a projector costs more than a TV sometimes. Plus you get a screen, and then it, in a few years it's fading already and all that kind of stuff. So if somebody, again, they're starting out, they have some money, you love, obviously, and we just talked about how the monthly sets and the environments, you love that, and it changes and it's new. New always brings momentum, which is great. But if you didn't have the money at first, you would say, with the money you do have, invest in just creating a nice static set that doesn't change. Use projection, maybe change the graphics, obviously, if you're using a curriculum that does that. And then grow in maybe to like a monthly thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we did have a static set, and when we first started out, and it had an island theme to it, and not much changed, every month. I mean, maybe the props and things that we used for the teaching lent themselves to whatever that theme was. But once 252 kids really started moving towards themes, we had to make some changes, because it just didn't fit to have, a construction zone on Discovery Island. So we made some changes and really moved more towards a changing set, or a set that wasn't as tied to a theme. Like, if it's a static set, it can be a really cool environment that just is fun for kids. It's got bright colors, maybe, some tube with those balls that, ball pit balls in it. And it doesn't lend itself to any island or that kind of a thing that limits you. And then you can just add to it. You have a chalkboard where you write things on, or colorful things that match what you're teaching about, or you bring in one big prop and that matches, and you can move that on and off, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think static sets can work great, especially if they're engaging and colorful, and the wow factor can come with just those small little changes that kids aren't expecting, but every time they come in, there's something new. So,
yeah. And the key is, if you do it well, hopefully you earn the right to ask for more money in your budget in the future to do it. We started out with no budget for it because, like you said, when 252 started doing themes, for a while there, we loved the idea. We started to decorate for it, but we didn't have any budget money for it. We didn't know that was coming. I'm thinking of like February one year, and or somewhere around there was like a fall festival friend. I don't know what it was, but it was like our island totally got covered up. You know what I mean? But we didn't have any budget money then. I remember we were taking it from anything else. It's like, is there any leftover resource money? Is there any leftover any money? And we grew it. I would say it probably took, maybe you could remember, but in my mind, I think it'd be helpful for people to know, it probably took 3 to 4 years easy before we grew it from nothing budget wise to now. And for the last number of years, we've spent the same on our environment and decor that we spend on the curriculum in a year. So like every church is different sizes, has different budgets, all that. But if you're listening, that might be something to help you relate to like what we spend now. It's still not that much, quite frankly, as you know, because you make it work every month. But you do things where you do some that are lighter and they cost less so that you can build up on the next one, right? So that's another good thing you can do.
Yeah, I think next month we're going to be reusing a lot because we're coming to the end of the year here. So, I might have built out pretty big over the summer, and now I'm making
Money's
up for
gone. Money's gone. Yeah.
But we have a lot of insulation foam. We hide it behind our actual backdrop because that's another thing, is the whole storage aspect of it. Especially if you're portable or share space, you have to figure out how you're going to take these panels down and where you're going to put them and that kind of thing. So we have a bunch that we shove behind the actual backdrop, and we'll be using a lot of that next month as we decorate for a game show theme to teach about stewardship. So
that's awesome. Yeah. So that'd be a good way to talk about what I want to talk about next, which is like, how does it work practically each month? What does the timeline look like? And the key here is, years ago, you did most of this yourself, and you would have people help at different times. So there'd be a handful of people that would help each month, but it's a lot of work, to build those kind of sets. Not always. Again, it's what you want to do with it. You could do something that takes you 2 hours a month. But you were doing excellent, elaborate sets that look great. And then I don't know if it was a couple of years ago, you really built a team, and they have done really well. They've owned a lot of it. There's like teams within the team, for the most part at this point. So can you walk us through like what a typical month would look like, going from your first moment of planning it to it's done, and then explain how the team is a part of that? I think that would be really helpful.
Sure. And just a little background on that. I will say, when I was building them by myself, when it first started, I loved it. I loved this whole idea. I love to decorate. I love, themes and building and constructing all of it. But the problem was, as my job began to change a little bit and I had more leadership responsibilities in my role, I had to hand off some of this. And it started out okay because I would bring a team in. My problem was getting ahead enough to be able to delegate well. And I'm not very good at that. I'm getting better, and this team has helped me a lot. But I would think about what I wanted to do, and I'd ask a few people to weigh in on that. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, let's build on this night. And people would come out. I'd gather whoever I could gather, and I would, we would paint, and then they'd have to dry, and it would sit there, and they were done. And so I was coming back, putting it all away or putting it together and finishing it up all by myself. And it just got really difficult to keep going at this pace. So it was a year ago, actually, that I pulled this team together. Anyone who had ever worked with me on set design, I asked them to come out and have a meeting, and I asked for their input, and they came up with this amazing schedule. I was ready to go to 4 times a year making sets, and I was going to have a static set the rest of the time. But they were like, nope, we're not giving up on this. We can make it happen. So they helped me come up with this. And the way we work now, 2 nights a week. We knew we needed 2 nights of the month, not 2 nights a week. I'm sorry, 2 nights of the month to build the set, because we needed the first night to be able to paint, and then everything had to dry. And the second night we would come back and put it together. So we determined, we kind of worked backwards. We said, okay, so if the first Sunday of the month, we need to have the set ready, that week going into the first Sunday of the month is where our second build happens. That's where it actually goes together on the stage, and we put it all, everything we've created comes together. Backing that up, the week prior, we'd have another set build night. And that one was the one where we would do all the preliminary things. Knowing that we had these 2 nights already out, and people also in our church are part of small groups and things like that, we didn't want to have to pull people for another meeting to come collaborate and figure out what we were going to actually build. So we decided to create a Facebook page, a private group, not a page, I'm sorry, a private group. And I invited everyone to it. And all of our brainstorming happens on that page. So again, backing up the process here, I have one person who really rose up out of that group as more of an admin, and she loves all of that, and she works on social media, so she was able to just completely own that. She grabs the graphics off of the website, the 252 Kids website, and she makes a whole album for me, and she puts our build nights on there, what nights of the month we're actually building. We decided to keep it very consistent. We wanted a Tuesday and a Wednesday because some people couldn't do certain nights. So we'd say one week we build on Wednesdays and the next week we build on Tuesdays, and that's the rhythm every single month. But what happens is, so let's say for October, we put graphics on that Facebook page probably the end of August, beginning of September. People started talking and they start, adding ideas, and I create a Pinterest page and we go to that Pinterest page and we, people add to that or they just look at it. And then once we have sort of a bunch of ideas coming together, one particular person who leads this team, and he's more of the construction guy. So he's not an artist, but he's more of like a craftsman. He comes together with me and this admin, and the 3 of us meet. That'll be happening this Sunday, for example. So people have already been collaborating about the ideas for October. This Sunday, we're going to meet, and that's our land the plane meeting. That's what we call it. So we look at all these ideas. And I would say I still pretty much drive the final idea, with them. I get their ideas and everything, but I kind of say, okay, let's make this happen and let's make this happen. And can we make this happen? And Rich, our craftsman, sort of looks at it and decides what we need to do for shopping and what materials we need. And Sarah keeps note of all of that. And then either he does some shopping. I still have my hand in some elements of that. Sort of delegating some of that shopping also to other members of the team. And so we've landed the plane, we have these ideas, and now we have shopping week. And that's when we gather all of our materials. And then we have our build nights, and we build from there. And then the whole process starts over again. Once the set is up, that next week, the new graphics come up onto Facebook, and we start thinking about that. So that's kind of the rhythm of how we work it.
That's awesome. So at some point, like near the end of the month, you are doing a little bit of build and look a little bit towards the next month. But for the most part, it's kind of 1 month at a time.
Yeah, the vision originally was we would have the graphics out 6 weeks out, so that when we were at the builds, we could have actual conversations while we were there. That hasn't exactly happened. Sometimes It does, sometimes it doesn't. But I think at the very beginning, we were all gung ho, and that was working. But keeping that pace and keeping ahead is hard. I'm not going to lie. So I'm grateful we're a month out, looking at the graphics and getting ideas together. So.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about how people can connect with you, if they have any questions. So one is ReadySetSunday.com, obviously. Mm-hmm. You blog about other things, too, related to large group and elementary environments and storytelling and all that stuff. But you will write a post about, like, the ideas and where it seems like it might be headed. Mm-hmm. And then you'll write posts about what it ended up being, how it worked. So I think anybody especially if you're new to this or newer to this, I'd definitely encourage you to go there and subscribe and even look through. You have the tools and tips, supplies, like things like that we use there in the site, which is really helpful. And then the other thing, we'll put all links to all this in the show notes, is that webinar. So if this is something you do, somebody does, I would encourage them to watch that webinar, because we talk about some of the same stuff, but you've got pictures. You've got like 60 pictures, you know what I mean, of the tools and tips and some different sample environments and things like that, which is really helpful. Is there any other way, the Facebook page, can you tell a bit about your Facebook page?
The Facebook page has been a great way for people to connect, because I've noticed people are starting to share some of what they are doing, and I'll post those pictures on there, or you can just, post your own photo on there if you'd like to. I do have a Twitter and a Pinterest for Ready Set Sunday. So I'm And I think we've just started an Instagram. So I'm trying to have lots of different social media venues, but the Facebook page seems to be the one that has the most discussion. So people are, getting on there and looking at things and commenting and asking questions. And I will post photos in process too that don't have a full blog post. So sometimes, I'll have these formal blog posts. I just posted one today for October that's really just our ideas at this point, but we're not sure yet. I'll be landing that plane on Sunday, as I said. I'll come back next week with another post that says, this is the plan and this is how we plan to do it. Because so much of it sometimes is, how did that happen? How did you make those? And so you'll see most of that in the blog, but there are things that I'll post directly onto the Facebook page in the middle of a build night. I'll just take some photos and throw it up there. So I'm hoping, we really try to keep those about 2 weeks out because I know people want to get ahead. We can't get too far ahead, quite honestly. I know some people are asking. 252 Kids just came out with all their graphics for the entire year, and they've released them to everyone, and everyone was so excited about that. And while I don't have the storage to make things that far in advance. So I really had to not build much further than a week out, a week and a half out, so that we could just have 1 week of needing to find a place to store, which is usually my car or my basement.
Your basement. We joke that part of our church storage is Lisa's basement, which it's true. Some of it is true. You have just so people know, what are some random items stored in your basement? Is there like oversized McDonald's fries from that one thing? Is that there? Okay.
You could supersize me. Yep. With a life app of contentment. And I have fries and a huge popcorn box still, which we pull out for our CCC at the movies theme, which is church-wide, not just in elementary. And I have light boxes. There's kind of a rule of thumb I've been working on, which is, is this something that I would use again? If it's too specific to something, then I probably will throw it out. But light boxes, for example, we did a whole thing at Easter one time for the Life App of Hope, and it was all about light. And so we made these light boxes out of filters, and we used, some people used LEDs. We didn't have the money for that. So we used a pole and put, string lights around the pole, and it served the same purpose and looked pretty cool. But those I saved because I might use the light boxes to add some glitz to our game show theme next month. So I try to think about, I've got some skyscrapers in there. I think we've got some stand-ups of paparazzi from a theme we did. And so, there's a lot of crazy stuff.
Some waves or water, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, mountains. That's what I thought. Mountains, yeah. Because there are things you use again. Some people are thinking, when do you use oversized French fries again? But they're long. It's just foam core.
Yep.
Like, almost not 2x4s, but like that's what they look like. You know what I mean? Yep. So you could use that for a number of different things. That's fun. Well, Lisa, thanks for coming on the podcast and sharing all that. Thanks for doing the webinar too a few months ago. So anybody that's interested, really wants to see the detail of it, I highly recommend that because we have pictures and we talk a little bit. It's kind of like your blog where we look at the picture in process, and then you tell us what you used and what's going on here. And then we look at the finished product, and we do that on, 5 or 6, sets, which was really fun. So obviously, I think you do a great job at our church. And I love seeing that, like, this is a thing now in church world where a lot of people are doing it. And like you said, people comment on your Facebook page, on Ready Set Sunday's Facebook page, share their pictures. You learn from them. I mean, that's what's awesome. It's really cool. So
yeah, it's great. Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I appreciate the opportunity. So
if people want to reach out because they have any questions, what's the best way to do that? Through the site, a specific email, through Facebook? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can reach out through the Facebook page or the site. Lisa at readysetsunday.com is my email for this. So that's fine. But Facebook page is always a good area too.
Yeah, that's why that's such a great place because so many people use it regularly. That's why your Facebook group has worked well for your planning team. And then your Facebook page has worked really well to collaborate with other ministry leaders. That's awesome. Well, Lisa, thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Take care.